Hey folks, Ora here. 17 Halls of Atonement key. This is more of a trinket comparison video rather than a play-by-play walkthrough, as with the other keys, because I am using the more widely used conventional setup. So I am using Tempest of the Lightbringer as my legendary on my legs rather than my belt, purely because I couldn't be bothered to recraft. I'm also running Ocular Gland, so the trinket from either Jailer, heroic version unfortunately, and I am running a 246 Overwhelming Power Crystal that I acquired yesterday morning. So we'll just get straight into it and we'll start talking about the pros, the cons, how things felt, and just general overall performance in the dungeon. So, key goes in. We'll caveat that this was taken off stream last night, and was, well, I was drinking last night on stream, so I'd had a fair amount of whiskey at this point. So my gameplay's not perfect, but then again, it isn't perfect at the best of times. So, can't really use drinking as an excuse. Anyway, so this first poll, kind of threw me off because this was a complete and utter pug. There was no comms, no warning, no nothing, so there was no link in party about the route we were taking. So I'm just having to completely play this from a reactionary point of view, which does mean that I think as the dungeon goes on, my cooldown usage becomes worse and worse because I'm trying to plan out 5 or 6 stages ahead and also trying to fit in to make sure that I have my cooldowns when we need them. You can see that the tank is playing pogo, so I sack him and just carry on. So this first burst, definitely starting to feel the difference between IQD with balanced stats, which I do at this moment, and a dedicated stat trinket that can only give me one set of stats. Now, my raid setup, in terms of gearing, is very much kind of balanced across the thing. So I have like, I think I have 590 haste, bearing in mind I have Old Warrior Soul, so that will ramp up to 690-ish haste off the top of my head. If not closer to 700, which puts me to about 21% that I need. Well, 21.5, 21.6 haste it puts me at roughly, which is the execution sentence breakpoint. But I also have about 640 versatility and about 660 mastery, and crit is basically my dump stat where, you know, the worst of it goes into. Which unfortunately gives the problem for IQD from a ratings perspective, that there is every possibility from pull to pull that I might get different stats. Because it depends if I'm given versatility by someone in the party, or if I'm given extra mastery for standing next to somebody, or whatever else. Which devalues IQD. Now, in my Mythic Plus gear, on the other hand, I don't really have that problem as much, because my mastery is 900. I have next to no versatility, and my haste is at the 21% mark, just because of the gear that I have equipped. So, I pretty much always get mastery when I IQD for Mythic Plus, which does mean that there are points where my burst is meaty, because obviously our mastery increases our holy damage done. However, it's on a 3-minute cooldown, so it doesn't line up with anything, which means it's every other wings. So you kind of go through this 6-minute process of huge, mini, big, mini, huge type burst. Which is alright, but it becomes problematic, because if you consider that most dungeons are 30 minutes, but if you're running easy content, you're looking at averaging like 18. Well, this particular dungeon took 25 minutes. 25 doesn't divide by 3 perfectly. Which means that you can't use the trinket on cooldown to get the most benefit out of it. you can't do this. The same goes for a 2-minute cooldown, but a 2-minute, like having a 90-second cooldown in the form of OPC works perfectly because you can just macro it to wings, which means that every time I wings, I am getting that extra crit, and because wings gives 20% additional crit anywhere while you have it, it means that I go from having my 13% crit out of wings to having 50% crit with the wings and trinket, which is huge when you pair that in with the rest of our abilities and we go through our crit rotation. Well, not crit rotation, our burst rotation. I say crit rotation because Execution Sentence is a really good benchmark for how much damage you're doing, because it accumulates 20% of your total damage during that 8-second period and then slaps it to the target. My unbuffed average, like my good average, was high 40s, low 50s. So I think my personal best capped out at about 55k-ish for an Execution Sentence without Overwhelming Power Crystal, which isn't bad. Bearing in mind that's no raid buffs, that's no external help or debuffs on targets or anything like that. That is me just smacking a target dummy as hard as I can for 8 seconds, and I did this for over the course of a morning, comparing the two results. Yes, this does take into account certain crits and things like that. It's why it's an average done over. I think I was at the training dummy for about 3 hours doing this. So, and this is both with raid gear and my Mythic Plus gear. So, about 55k. Overwhelming Power Crystal took my Execution Sentences from that lovely 55k to 71. My Execution Sentence hit the training dummy for 71,000 damage at the end of those 8 seconds. That's just not fair. I'd also like to point out that that was single target. Like, my burst has gone from about 18k peak without Bloodlust to closer to 22, 23k without Bloodlust. Yes, I'm talking about this with Divine Resonance on, but still. Like, that is just bonkers in terms of the amount of damage it does. And the amount of damage it augments. Because Overwhelming Power Crystal plays perfectly into our front-loaded, we do damage with wings build. Whereas, I suppose we're supposed to be thinking about more, like, consistency, I guess? But, yeah, no. That trinket had no right being as much of a DPS increase as it was. So anyway, in terms of how this felt playing it through the dungeon, it was interesting to say the least. The reason for that is because you felt its impact every time you had wings. Now, how much of that is just wings and the rest of it is the additional crit from Overwhelming Power Crystal going into the fact that, like, Final Reckoning on a large AoE pack with wings up, your Final Reckoning's got a 50% chance to crit everything it touches, is still up for debate, and I will need to do more keys to practice that. But you felt it in the downtime. Having, say, the 1-minute PvP trinket, every time you go to hit Final Reckoning, you had that additional, like, bonus damage to kind of help supplement your sustain a little bit. But as we go into these higher keys, that sustain becomes less and less relevant, as pointed out by people in our community and just watching other Ret Paladins, because you're kind of wanting to go from pack to pack to pack, and you're kind of looking at using your 1 minutes, 2 minutes and things like that pretty quickly. And so we're about to go into a relatively large pull. I can't remember if I bubble here, but I have wings anyway. So I wait for everything to get stacked. And then we go. And you can see that, like, I'm doing I'm doing a considerable amount of damage very quickly. I still feel like I've got a lot of place to improve, because this 30-ish K I could do with Divine Resonance, so I'm trying to think that, like, is there something else I've got to do? Now, I War Stomp to try and stop the casters, because I'd already rebuked, and at this point I'm kind of panicking. I'm like, I don't have the utility to keep myself alive here. And it's these kind of pulls that make me a little bit wary of Ocular Gland, because that was a mastery hit that I took, because I was below 50% health for a while. But so far, my average DPS has kind of gone up. I say kind of gone up because, again, my playing wasn't perfect. I was making a lot of errors, and I did spend time dead, which meant that I wasn't imparting in fights. So my overall DPS for this dungeon is actually only about 7.5k. Not that high, because I've done higher with Divine Resonance. But again, this kind of goes back to the fact that for a coordinated group, I think that we'd get a lot more benefit out of it, and we'd essentially be treated like fire mages. A melee version of a fire mage where your group could pull around you having your 2-minute cooldowns. Because end of the day, high coordinated groups will tend to pull around cooldowns. It's just a case of who has the better cooldowns. And again, that Mists of Tyr Scythe that I'll be doing will have something interesting to show in terms of that. Although one thing that I do actually want to highlight, if we just go back slightly, is Wall of Terror. I'm about to get targeted by this carnage. I dodge it? I didn't need to bop and I didn't need to bubble. Obviously bubble was on cooldown, but still. So yeah, anyway. Right, so we pick up the power and then obviously take this pack out. So it's kind of been a bit of a weird thing. But we do have Bloodlust back for the first boss, which is nice. Again, kind of one big problem with no communication, and this is what's going to come to bite us. He's done a lot of pulling down here deliberately so that we're about to invis skip. I don't know that the invis skip is coming at this point, and I have 2 minutes left on my cooldown for my potion. So, not the best. But it's fine. Yeah, 2 Venthia mages. We had Stoneborns for days. So we've got everything. Bloodlust is popped. And let's go into it. So we generate our holy power. And we climb. I try and catch up to the mage that has both Stoneborns, but I just don't think I can manage it, even with my burst. And this is definitely where you feel, having Tempest the Lightbringer, this is where you definitely feel it over Divine Resonance, because my burst there was only 14k. Which kind of hurt, but it's still a good burst and a decent amount of damage. But then again, I had just come off a mist, and despite hoofing up the first boss, Ingram Alloc got to say hello to 250,000 execution sentence to the face. 243,000 an execution sentence hit for in there now. It just isn't fair. I fully intend to try and make a build where we can get 500,000 damage into Ingram Alloc. Just pop everything Lust Potion and smack him into next week, which may require a Divine Resonance on. Seeing as some Templar's Verdicts were also hitting for 114k. But anyway, we'll get into that when I do that particular key. So yeah, you can see here that I basically just wait for my invis port. I got 10 seconds to go, so we'll just skip. We'll skip my Tauren ass just waiting. And Echelon. Now, I don't play this fight particularly well. I try to greed destroy some stuff and end up standing in the red crap. So, poor play on my part. Because you can see here that because we don't really have kicks to bring them in, and the Demon Hunter's not running chains, we end up in this situation where only a few of them are shattered. So I stand here, but the mage behind me ends up baiting a red pool. So I end up trying to position myself in a place there. See, mage baited red. Now I try. Curse of Stone. I get targeted. I try and get onto them to destroy them, but I'm actually stood in the red pool, and as a result instantly die due to the leap, which is pretty rough, and I shouldn't have done it, but at the same time the mage shouldn't really have had a red pool spawn on them. I was res just in time for this, but I did take a mastery hit, so I lay on hands with myself to get myself back out of the mastery deficit. You have to get out of there and hope that he lands on all of these, which he does, and we just crack on. But yeah, like fights like this, it's not too bad because my DPS is still huge because I get the benefit off the crit on the AoE. But single target does suffer. I may attempt to do Magistrate's Judgment at some point and see how that plays between the two. Again, Incinerator, Arcaloth, without communication, the kick thing is really scary. So I always try to get first kick and let the rest of the group kind of work it out themselves. Because I can't remember if this was a group of friends or if we were all pugs. But he is quite scary with no comms, purely because of the fact that Inferno is horrendous. Farming DOS, I've found that out the hard way. When 4 people whiff their kick and you're the healer, and it's like, just at this point he knew it was gonna hurt. So we're now at our 77% mastery, and I'm like, okay, Chief, how are we gonna do this? And let's just, let me just forewarn that this pull is not going to look pretty. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Because again, the Demon Hunter doesn't say anything, he just leaps in and then leaps out. Very, very close to death, and in the process pulls out the Vicious Gargan. Again, kind of no... we're kind of in a position now where we have multiple inspiring mobs, so they can't be CC'd, and these Houndmasters need to die, otherwise our tank's about to get shredded. So I pop wings and I just go to town on Triangle, doing my best to do some like serious damage to him. And then I go on to Moon to try and do the same. Keep like hoping that, just hoping that the Collector is kept away so that I can stun the Houndmaster when Loyal Beast comes out. In the process, he's just kiting them all around and letting the Frost Mages do their work. I get rid of the curse being a Kyrian. That was a Loyal Beast. So I take the stun and do the Houndmaster. Now, I do have War Stomp for the next stun. Yeah, a little bit slow there on the disengage and turning around and smacking it. Oh. So, we go into our 1 minute burst. I want this thing dead. I lay on hands the mage to assist with healing. And the execution sentence comes in clutch. It was a relatively small execution sentence at only 30k, but still, it came in when we needed it. Which means that I can now kill these smaller things and let the group just deal with it. So, the mages got to do a lot of kiting AoE type damage, and the majority of my damage for that pull was single target, and I still came out at 9k, which was pretty nice. So I did some work. Now, I believe I die twice more, I think. Me just being me. But key's pretty much a shoo-in from here. Tank takes a lot of damage. Watching this back now, I just realised how much. Eesh. All hail Shami Mastery, eh? Yeah. Yeah. I summon my little Kyrian steward mid-combat. Like, I need vials. I don't trust. Now, yeah, for this final choice, there's nothing really to kick. Between these next two. I'd rather take the, if you take a stupid amount of damage, you get healed jobby. And have a movement speed increase. Because again, yeah, after a few drinks, I knew for a fact that Lord Chamberlain was going to be a problem. And also, side note, when I start drinking, I go through lots of flapjacks. That was a box of 20 flapjacks. Haha, all the kicks. But it's alright. As you can tell, young Flip-Flop was the one to have the Stoneborns. Now, I never do like this room as a paladin, because I've just got no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not entirely sure I should have kicked him, because the tank had obviously left him there for a reason, but that was another lay on hands. All hail the utility man. And me being me, didn't see the shit under me. I didn't see the red pole. Which, to be fair, like I should have seen, but camera angles. Camera angles did not help. So yeah, I just stayed dead for this section. So, finish my drink, and then just wait. So if we skip to Sigga takes a while to die. I get my combat res. And then we're going on to Lord Chamberlain. I don't like this because I just get riptided on the left. It kind of sucks, and I'm like, I want my 70% bonus, man. So I actually health pot to get myself back up to the mastery threshold ahead of me bursting. Because I want the extra mastery from the 2 damage increases. I don't know how I avoided that. Me and my big Tauren thick cheeks. Let's go clap clap down the aisle. But yeah, not much really to speak of for the final part. And yeah, the key finishes without too much of a problem. Now, so summary then, before we go into something a little bit different and I request help for something. The differences and the best way for me to sum up IQD versus Overwhelming Power Crystal. If you're very stat heavy in one area, IQD, very good, but doesn't sync up well with stuff. Overwhelming Power Crystal lines up perfectly with your wings, and if you have low crit like I do, it basically amounts to about 40% crit when you pair it with wings. Which means that my burst goes from relatively scary to holy mother of God, what was that? Which is great fun. But I would stress for casual players that it really doesn't matter which one you pick. If you are going to try and push the highest stuff like I am though, because of the ease of use surrounding something like Overwhelming Power Crystal or the PvP trinket over, say, IQD, I'd use Overwhelming Power Crystal any day of the week. You can remove some of the variants on kind of what IQD gives you, like the execute, for instance. You can actually self-target. You can have like a self-target macro when you hit IQD, and you can force it to give you stats rather than execute, because let's face it, you can't execute yourself. So you do have that option, which does remove some of the RNG of it, because you want the stats. The execute is alright, but at only about 23k, that's literally like a crit template verdict for us at this point. It's not that impactful, especially for a 3-minute cooldown. You want the 700 odd stats that it gives. Whereas Overwhelming Power Crystal will give you the stats all the time, and it doesn't matter if you've got a Resto Druid healer down the block that doesn't know what mana is. So that assessment and stuff out of the way. A quick side note, and I'd really like a hand with this because I have no blaming clue what is going on here in the slightest, is if I go Mythic Dungeons, and swap back to the main screen. Someone want to explain to me what the hell this means? Like, how? Like, don't get me wrong, I'm pretty happy for the most part. Like, I'm not too bad, I don't think. But how do you work these out? Because, like, date. Like 75. Can I click this one? The fight comes from a leaderboard and has no log associated with this. So is this just do like the logs just quantify the fact that like I've done high keys? Because if we go onto my Radar IO, well, I'm like 44th on Ret Paladin on Kazakh, I think. Yeah, I'm 44th at current. So yeah, like, how does that work out? Can you use those logs to help improve? If anyone has the answers, please comment below, because I would really like to keep improving. I want to try and get into, say, the top 20 on my realm, or even higher if I can. Whether that be solo queue Pug Life Dabber, or if it's through something else. Anyway, I will get the Mists of Tyrannoside video out either today or tomorrow. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, folks.